What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Healthcare Hustle Podcast. Today, we are joined by Arlana Brown, a passionate nonprofit leader who serves as founder and CEO and executive director of Project S.A.V.E, a Philly-based nonprofit that helps survivors of sexual and domestic violence heal through therapeutic services. Arlana, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. Now, we go way back,
Yeah.
nowadays we old enough to say, you know,
Say what our parents were saying.
exactly. Went to high school, Science Leadership Academy in Philadelphia. So I know a little bit about your story and have done some of my research. But the first question we love to ask our guests is just tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us your superhero origin story.
Okay, my superhero. I like that superhero origin story. So yeah, from Philly, West Philly to be exact. I grew up in a very appreciative, like for education,
Mm,
um, household. So I was exposed to a lot of things that had me like thinking about other people, but like not thinking about other people, like how to necessarily help them,
hmm
long term, more so in like the now. So went to SLA, and my dream was to do nursing. I wanted to be a nurse practitioner specializing in pediatrics.
Wow, yeah.
So I got into nursing school. I went to Temple. Um, and right off the bat, I felt like I could be doing a lot more.
Mm,
I felt like at Temple's nursing program, it was a small amount of us, of Black nurses,
right.
across the program, all 4 years.
Wow.
And I just felt like we were ignored, like we were looked to be pushed out and not really succeed. So we didn't have really that support to go to, if we failed a class, who to go to get help with it,
What?
like none of that. And so kind of in that reflection period, I was like, well, do I see myself just helping in a nursing profession, or do I see myself helping in a how many people can I touch type of ordeal?
Yeah.
And I started like, still trying to go through nursing school. And then I switched over to Westchester, transferred to Westchester. And over that summer, it was like, oh, I'm just going to Westchester. I'm gonna finish out my degree. And I had this dream about this organization that like had glass doors, everything was glass, and that
Mm,
people were coming there to really get help for sexual violence and domestic violence. They were the
wow.
first two things that kind of came to mind, and just ways of like not even just doing it through therapy, but art
hmm
therapy, dance therapy, all of these different types of approaches for these complex problems. And then I just kind of hit the ground running after that. Got up the next day. I discussed it at the time with like one of my friends, and they were like, I think you should do it. And then it's just been Project S.A.V.E. ever since. So
Wow, first of all, thank you so much. There's so much in there, and just for reference, like it's crazy that you would have that experience at Temple, which is in the heart of North Philly.
yes, people
Like,
talk about this all the time. And I'm
like
like,
that is
you know?
that is that is wild. But at the same time, and Albert Einstein Medical Center, that's like it's a name brand, place in Philly, particularly on the north side. Everybody knows about that, and it's crazy just to hear you kind of say like the lack of diversity, the lack of inclusion really,
Right.
is something that actually was kind of like a cog in your
Yeah.
journey, was a push. And then for you to go to Westchester, which is the exact opposite
Opposite.
environment,
Very much.
is very interesting. And so and I also love the fact that you called out like, even while you were doing nursing school, just understanding you could have a broader approach because that's how it was for me. Bio major, thinking I wanted to be a doctor, but then like kind of eventually realizing, I'm really trying to have a different it's a different level of impact, right, when it
Right.
comes to communities and populations. So I've listened to other interviews that you've done. I believe on the Sunny Show, I believe
Hmm.
was one. And one of the things that really caught my attention early on in the interview was when you mentioned how just the lack of resources for survivors of sexual and domestic violence, really kind of stuck out to you, just
Yeah.
like through your college journey. So can you talk a little bit more about that lack of resources and what it is like typically for someone who is seeking help after sexual or domestic violence?
Yeah. So I think early on when I first started Project S.A.V.E., of course, I started doing research, like what's in the city, who can I talk to? Because that's really what I wanted to really do, just like get in front of someone and talk through this. And then I found out that it was like one service provider for the
Wow.
city,
That's
and
crazy.
their waiting list was like 6 months. So it was like, all right, if someone has this assault and it's 6 months until they're able to be seen for an assessment,
Wow.
what happens in that 6 months? Like, what is the connection with them? Are you communicating with them? Like, what's going on? And I just felt that it was radio silence. Like, you couldn't really
Mm,
figure out where's the help at in between that waiting period. And a lot of people don't have the resources to wait, right? Like, we
mm,
start thinking of like PTSD, all of the mental health issues that could come out of the sexual and domestic violence.
right.
And so it was more so just about filling that need. So I feel like I just kind of jumped in head first. I had no experience with nonprofit,
Oh, wow.
like nothing. I knew nothing about it. And I remember one night staying up and just like researching how to form a board. And then I like wrote my bylaws, my articles of incorporation. I was like, no, I have to like do this because the resources are very low. And even now, I mean, it's 2024,
Mhm,
we still have the statistic of 1 in 3 women will be sexually assaulted in their lifetime.
mm,
If the resources were actually helpful and we were
mhm,
actually having a abundance of them and everyone was like a all hands on deck type of
mhm,
approach, we could be
mhm,
a lot further with the resources for people in the city.
mm,
So I think another disconnect also in that research was that these resources were located in the center city, where
mm.
you're surrounded by these high buildings, you're surrounded by people dressed up. And do I really want to go down there if I just been assaulted? Like,
Right.
no, I'm not. So trying to also think of it as a community approach, go into their communities, go where they are to give them the services that they need.
Wow, that's so thank you so much for providing that overview. And that statistic, is just that's crazy, 1
Yeah.
in 3. And I actually when I was going through Project S.A.V.E.'s website and some of the programs that you do, I loved how it's very comprehensive. I mean, y'all provide a lot of different things, but I think also in terms of just the different things that the awareness, the different kind of topics that y'all have to bring awareness to. Like, I really never even thought about prevention from
Hmm.
like a community side and what, like, all of us need to be doing,
Right.
when it comes to sexual and domestic violence. So much of it is really centered on the individual,
Yeah.
a lot of the times, in terms of just like, them being responsible for,
The healing.
stuff, when it's like it could really be a whole process of a lot of different people. So I
Hmm.
appreciate you highlighting that. One thing, so this is the healthcare hustle. So we, typically have people who are healthcare administration, definitely public health people, but it's kind of those two worlds that I try to bring together.
Hmm.
And I've had different conversations, different stories of myself just understanding the lack of resources inside the healthcare system. So,
Hmm.
one thing that I wanted to ask you is, what are your thoughts on how the healthcare system and the public health, field currently supports survivors of sexual assault, or just is there even enough real care going on, like in the clinical worlds or in those kind of spaces, for survivors?
One thing I've learned over the years, because this comes up a lot, is the lack of training. People
Mm,
people can't provide something they don't know.
wow.
And so for a lot of the time, even with the healthcare system, it's a lot of distrust with people even going to go seek for a rape kit, right? Like, we don't
Mm,
have the trust in the healthcare system to believe our story, to even go to that type of invasion of privacy to go get this test done. Um, I currently work at Public Health Management Corporation, so
mhm.
PHMC. And it's funny that you mentioned that because a lot of grants are coming through to actually train
Okay,
hospitals and clinics for this topic.
that's
What
good.
can we
Yeah.
do from like a community-based approach to help with these type of topics?
Hmm.
And so, wow, I feel like over the last couple of years that we've been doing Project Save, it's kind of been like trying to really teach people the basics. Like, people don't have to be passed out drunk to be raped.
Mm,
People don't have to be half naked to be raped. It
yeah.
can happen at all times of day. It can happen anywhere. Getting away from that stigma, even in the healthcare system, is very important to even
Mm,
move forward to like these grants that are coming out to support this type of work and
right.
training and things of that nature.
Yeah, I appreciate that answer. It's definitely, I can imagine, and I see that in so many different in so many different situations where like you would think that the healthcare system or a healthcare provider will be your go-to, and really it's like you said, the lack of training is
Yeah,
key, and just unpreparedness, and honestly sometimes it can make things worse,
yeah,
for a victim or for a survivor, right? And so that is very interesting to me. I want to talk about, another thing that you mentioned earlier, which I think is key, is actually something that I read in a report, where in terms of just like the stigma around
mhm,
survivors even seeking services,
yeah,
but then also feeling like they're neglected by their healthcare providers, begin again because of what you said, that lack of access. And another thing that this report said was the mental health of survivors, and really having mental health services is something that is critical, for the
yeah.
healing process. So I know you all provide, those kinds of services at Project Save, but can you talk a little bit more just about, why mental health is important, for this specific population, and then also what you all do provide at Project Save?
Well, mental health in general, I think across the board is something that we just, as a community, as a world people, we just don't talk about for
Mm,
whatever reason. We have stigma like, oh, somebody think I'm crazy.
yeah.
But I think for survivors of sexual and domestic violence, it's extremely important to check in about their mental health, because you don't know how that's going to long term affect you,
Hmm.
right? Like someone could be totally fine after the situation for whatever reason, and then months later they start kind of developing these really these dreams. They start having like panic attacks,
Mm,
and then you kind of find out later on that they've developed PTSD. And so when we don't even include the conversation about mental health from these traumatic experiences, we kind of just let the situation go and not really have resources in place to help the person. Project Save, I think our approach to it was more so like we just want to get it ahead of it. We want to let people know it's
mhm,
okay to go to therapy. It's okay. I mean, and also even not just going to therapy, it's other ways that you can go about therapy. Something that's been coming up over the last couple of years, like the certified peer specialist, which I always think is a great alternative way if someone is like not open to the practitioner type of
mhm,
ordeal. So having that peer that is going through a similar experience and can kind of go off of based off of their experience and help you out is also another way to kind of approach that mental health aspect. But really, just kind of having the two in conversation at the same time, I think has helped, especially with Project Save. Because I feel like when we started, we were small, right? People didn't know about us, they couldn't trust us. And then we started having things focused on mental health. We're just talking about mental health. Like, how do you
mm,
see mental health in our communities? We had a couple of forums that I think a lot of people came out to, and they were just, I was really appreciative that people wanted to talk about mental health. And
right.
I think that's like the stigma about it, is that people aren't going to talk about it. But like, if you have these open areas and open forums for people, they'll come. You just have to provide that space. You have to provide that safety net for them to talk about.
Mm. I love that. And it's funny because I think that one thing that I'm learning more, particularly as I feel like I learn more about just what we're doing as public health practitioners and being in community, is a lot of times it is just providing that safe space. Like,
Yeah,
however you design that to really have people feel like they have a voice. And one
yeah,
thing that you actually asked, and I was gonna ask a little bit later on, but you brought it up, is that when y'all first started out, there was, people couldn't trust, there maybe
yeah,
hasn't been, or there wasn't as much trust. So can you talk about just like, how did you build that rapport with that community? Y'all have interacted with a lot of people for a
yes,
nonprofit, in
yeah.
Philly at this point. So yeah, how was that? And just what are some tips and tricks you could share with people on just how to build trust in the community?
Um, I will probably give a lot of thanks to Planned Parenthood
Oh
for what I'm
wow.
about to say,
Okay.
because I feel like they were the first big organization to believe in Project Safe. Like
Awesome.
within our first year, we were in a meeting getting like a referrals process set up. And
Wow.
so our first referral came through a Planned Parenthood, and I remember getting the call, and I immediately like turned my car around. I was like, "Oh my God, this is our first person. I have to go, right?" Like, and I remember pulling up, like really just excited to have this one person, and this woman was like looking at me like I was crazy. She was like, "I don't know why they called you.
Mm,
I don't need your help." Like,
mm,
and I was just like, "Okay." I gave her, I waited till she was finished her appointment, and I said, can I walk with you to the pharmacy? She had to go to the pharmacy. And she
Mm,
said, yeah, okay. And she didn't want to talk to me. She had like a little boy with her, her son. And I just started talking to them, like just started talking to her son and trying to get her warmed up. And within like the pharmacy, she still wasn't feeling me. She was like, I don't know why they called you. I don't need your services. I gave her a card. I
mm.
said, when you're ready, call me.
Wow.
We left. About 2 days later, she was calling.
Wow.
She had been assaulted. We
Mm.
assisted her with getting like a PFA, which is a protection from abuse order. But this was a different county. So this was outside of Philadelphia, by the way.
Okay.
So this is the first case outside of Philly.
Wow.
I don't know any of the laws for Delaware County, nothing like that.
Okay.
It's a completely different process, I will say, from Philly. But it was hard.
Mm.
It was very hard. And me showing up that day allowed her to trust us. And then after that, we were able to start setting her up with appointments. We were able to kind of start helping her like get things. And I really feel like if we would have just been like, okay, because she didn't want to talk to us and walked away, we
Yeah.
wouldn't have had her.
Wow.
And so our first community event, probably not a lot of people stopped by our table. We didn't get a lot of signups, but we kept going to community events. We kept showing up. I started going to acro yoga at Studio 34
Hmm.
for University City.
Okay.
And my first class was it was Thai massage. So people were touching me that I did not know. I was completely uncomfortable. But afterwards, I said it's a connection here between survivors and touch, right? Like
Wow.
after
Yeah.
you've been,
Oh, wow.
like you've been violated, you don't want anyone to touch you.
Hmm.
So how can we bridge these partnerships? And the next class, I started talking to a girl in the class. She was like certified in yoga. She started teaching yoga at Project S.A.V.E. That turned into acro yoga. That turned into now it's
Wow.
having a space in University City for people to come if they wanted to do acro yoga, yoga therapy. So that's how we kind of built our trust, really just showing up, even if we didn't get the response that we wanted, at least one person stopped by. So that was all that we needed to have to keep coming back to the community.
You just put a lot down there. A whole lot. Number one, just yeah, that story of getting that, first referral from Planned Parenthood. I can imagine, I could dream about just how powerful that moment must have
Yeah,
been because it's like a validator, like, wow, like, we
we're
are,
needed.
yeah, we're needed. We're looked at as a trusted resource by another huge organization.
Yeah,
And we have access now. And then I
yeah,
think just the lesson of you really y'all the passion kind of speaks to how you even um just conducted yourself with the first your first client, and I think that's just a beautiful illustration of what this work really looks like. A lot of people always ask, how can I do things, how can I get involved with my community, and I just appreciate you for sharing that story because that's crazy.
yeah,
It really is, and I can imagine that y'all have a lot of different beautiful moments,
yeah.
just from the past 8 years, which is amazing, by
It's
the way.
crazy.
Yeah, 8 years is beautiful. So let me ask you this, just like, how has it been for you doing this, year over year, continuing to successfully grow, the nonprofit and your impact, but also maintaining that professional grind and making sure you got, that 9 to 5 as
Yeah.
well, and just balancing the two. How has that been for you?
It's been very vulnerable. Had
Wow.
to show up even when you didn't want to.
Wow.
It's been a lot of, I mean, this work is not easy. You hear some very disturbing stories. Just, I
Yeah.
mean, from time of assault to maybe if they even decide to even go talk to the police, just
Mm,
it's completely crazy. But I feel like for me, it's been like that. That's what's kept me going. I'm feeling like if I'm not here, who do they have? And a lot of times I will say, like, a lot of the referrals that we get or people that come through the organization are BIPOC.
mm,
So it's like we have that community that probably feels really connected to us because of the way that we look. And
yeah.
acknowledging that and saying, well, I'm going to take away this resource because my feelings about it is like, this is too much, this is too hard, it's going to leave people vulnerable. And,
Mhm.
sometimes you have to be that hero in the community. You have to stand up, even if it's hard. So I think it's just really that vulnerability keeps me going, but it's also like a reminder that like if I stop, who's next?
Yeah.
What resource is next?
Wow. That's crazy. Because I'm really at a loss for words because I don't want to, skip over the severity of, sexual and domestic violence. And I
Yeah.
think, we've talked about stigma, we've talked about the lack of awareness and lack of training, and obviously that's just a reflection of where we are as a culture and as a
Right.
just a society with how we really talk about these issues. And I feel like even with so much stuff that's going on now in the media, it's still kind of trivialized to an extent, right?
Yeah.
We don't really ever think about, sometimes we do, but we don't really ever think about just the actual impact it has on not only the individual, but that, that person's well-being, the well-being of the community. And
Yeah.
there's actually a quote. I think my mom told me this a while ago. She was like, one of the most protected people in the black community is a sexual predator, right?
Mhm.
Just because
Yes.
the reality is, particularly when it comes to black communities, like it really will be swept under the rug.
Yes.
And I can only imagine. I've actually heard other stories about other communities of color where it's very similar. It's a
Yeah.
very similar practice. And so, can I just get your thoughts on just where we are in terms of progress of actually getting to a space where we can talk about this more? Obviously, there's an awareness month. It's probably been one for a while.
Yeah.
Now, you all are doing great, work your Project Save. But just from an everyday person perspective, where do you think people are in actually being able to understand, face this, and talk about sexual assault and domestic violence?
I think we still have a long way to go. I mean, with documentaries coming out and we have plain evidence of people doing crimes,
Yeah.
just call it what it is. They're doing things, and then because of the time that we're in, we'll make a joke about it, right? But this is
Mhm.
someone's actual experience, and it's not a joke, right? So we have to, as a community, I think we have a long way to just still become aware about even like those little things, how they can then become a bigger problem. If we're seen taking as a joke for this little thing, we'll take it for a joke for when it's bigger.
Mm.
And I think even you asked about like the 9 to 5, like in my day to day. So I'm a strategy development manager for PHNC. So kind of my day to day is really looking for funding for a bunch of
Mm.
these programs that we oversee.
Okay.
And so, those services include sexual services, domestic violence services. And you see how it's so much money out there
Mm.
speaking about just training, not direct service, training from healthcare systems to police departments to
Wow.
sheriff departments to community-based organizations. And you're like, I thought that the statistics say this. Why can't we kind of get on board, right? 1 in 3 is a lot from
Yeah.
women, and then one in like 5 for men. So like these are not
Wow.
very isolated events. These are happening every 68 seconds. Someone is being assaulted.
Wow.
So when you think of it in that perspective, you think of it being like, all right, what's out there? What can we do? And us as a community, like we know it's happening, but we just sit back and we're waiting for, I don't know, our government to do something, but that
Mm.
money is trickling down. Somebody has to grab that to actually start doing something.
Wow, that's an even more kind of like deeper insight to just like not only the potential support for solutions, but then
Hmm.
you also kind of just letting folks know, like, yo, most likely, like, if there's a problem, even if we're not talking about it, like,
Yeah,
there are, you could make something happen,
right.
like, you're doing in your day job, but also like you're doing as a, founder and CEO. And so like I think you've been really concise, honestly, with everything. Like you
Oh,
got
thank you.
straight to the point. So this is a great, very, very informative conversation. So I just had to ask, like, you're doing this work, you really are an expert at this point, and in a major city, your
Mhm.
hometown. So what's next for you, and what's next for Project Save? What's kind of like, your vision going forward? Because you are still very young to be so
Yes,
confident.
yes. I can't believe it. Well, for Project S.A.V.E, I've always seen Project S.A.V.E as being this blueprint of how we can approach community-based violence,
Mm,
how we can approach sexual violence, domestic violence. And so that's still like my ultimate goal, right? To expand Project S.A.V.E to other cities, if it's partnerships, if it's a standalone, whatever the case may be. But really just making sure that we're talking about these things and it's consistent. Like we shouldn't have to wait to April to discuss anything about sexual
that's
violence. We
very
shouldn't have to wait
true.
to October to discuss domestic violence because it's happening every day.
Mm,
So I feel like that's my big goal. But I will say, like I said, Project S.A.V.E. nonprofit world was not in my cards. And I feel like a couple months ago, I was looking back and I was like, I've worked in nonprofits since I got out of school.
Wow,
So,
yeah.
I feel like my heart is in the nonprofit world, being
Okay.
kind of like on the back end of things. And now I've kind of combined a first love, which was like the nursing aspect and being
Hmm.
kind of public facing into this organization that kind of combines all of it. Like we're a nonprofit, but we're a health institute. And so you have all of these type of different buckets that
Hmm.
I'm able to kind of still get a piece out of. So I'm appreciative for that. And I feel like that's kind of where I'm at for professionalism. Like just continue to grow in that area, continue to kind of be that backbone. Like it's a grant out here for violence prevention. It's a grant out here for domestic. And putting it back into our communities, right? If I'm not going to do it, who's going to do it? So
I
trying to live
love
by
that. No, I love that. Standing on business for real. Like,
that.
that's real. That's very real. And you made me actually think about I want to go back, because you said something that I jotted down. I didn't ask it. So about this connection between yoga as like kind of a therapy. I thought it
Hmm.
was actually very profound when you mentioned touch and just,
Hmm.
that obviously being a big deal when it comes to someone who's experienced sexual assault or domestic violence. So what has yoga done for you? I kind of get into my own yoga bag, from time to time. My wife does it every now and then. But I think it's something that I'm seeing, younger,
Yeah.
black folks get into, and I know people probably been doing this forever, but just what does it do for you, and how has it kind of just helped you from a therapeutic perspective?
It's calmed me. I
Mm,
feel like I've been able to be my authentic self. I feel like
wow.
working at Project S.A.V.E., people expect so much. They
Mm,
expect me to be this certain way. And I feel like connecting with yoga, connecting acro yoga is actually like my favorite practice, but connecting with those type of arts kind of just grounds me to know that I'm okay within my own body, so then I'm able to help others.
wow.
So bringing me back to that grounding space that everything is going to be okay. Like when we first started Project S.A.V.E., I thought my biggest hurdle was really just getting our name out there,
Mm.
and then people started getting our name out there. People started telling people about Project S.A.V.E., and it's kind of crazy because even now, sometimes people will come up to me and like I'll be talking and I'll say like Project S.A.V.E., and they're like, "That's you," and I'm like, yeah, that's
That's
me.
what's up.
Like, so it's kind of like those moments. But yoga definitely has allowed me to be grounded and be okay with doing this type of work, and knowing
Mm.
that I can always return to myself, to home, and kind of feel connected.
Wow, nah, that's beautiful. I really like that. Being good within yourself so you could be
Yeah.
good for others is very powerful. Okay, we're wrapping up here because, like I said, you've just been really informative, giving us just a lot of insight on this particular topic, but I think also just in the nonprofit space and
Hmm.
really just I think like embodying your passion. I think it's easy sometimes to sit back and just be posting. I used to feel like that, like, man, I just post
Yeah.
all the time, like I'm not even really out here, until I started
Yeah.
to figure out, okay, how do I really tap into the community I want to target? So what I have to ask you as we wrap up is, what's one piece of advice you would give to a college student or a young professional right now that wants to have the kind of impact that you've been able to have so far in your career?
It's kind of cliche, but it's more along the lines. It's like if you gotta be alone, you gotta be alone.
Ooh, I
It's
like
been
that.
time. Yeah, it's been times where I've been alone,
Mm,
trying to do something, and in that moment, I felt more powerful, to be honest, because it's
yeah,
like you can only count on yourself at that moment, and
right.
so if something doesn't happen, because you're counting on yourself. So just be not like don't be afraid to stand by yourself, to do it by yourself. People catch on, and when they catch on, you'll be farther than they even expected. So
I
just
like
gotta stay
that.
true to yourself.
I like that. That's definitely what's up. Okay, and then the last question, because I'm pretty sure you probably get a lot of people hitting you up anyway. But where can people find out more about you, more about Project Save? Any preferred social media or website or anything like that?
So projectsavephilly.com is our first point of contact, is our website. You'll get information about sexual violence, mental health initiatives, kind of the classes that we're thinking for the year. We do a lot of school programming, so it might be some opportunities for that type of collaboration. We're Project Save Philly on Instagram, I believe. I think it might be just Project Save. But and then Twitter is Project Save Philly.
Okay. All right. Well, y'all heard it here. Arlana, thank you so much. This is a very
Thank
dope
you.
conversation. It's just been amazing to see everything that you've been able to do. And I'm just looking forward to seeing like how things grow and just like the impact that you have already made just to continue to get bigger in Philly and beyond because this is really
Thank
dope
you.
and it's needed. It's so needed. So
Yes.
thank you. Thank you for your
Thank
time.
you. Thank you, Winston.